All right, today we're jumping into a really powerful personal story from writer Ken Alger. It's all about what it's like to grow up inside a whole web of social systems. It's a story about survival and about this huge difference between being, well, managed and being truly understood. So let's get into it.
The author kicks things off with this incredible line to describe his childhood. Think about it this way. Instability isn't just a storm that comes and goes. For him, it was the air he breathed every single day. And that is the absolute core of this story. It's not about a few bad things happening. It was a constant state of being that he had to learn how to navigate just to get by. And that idea right there, that brings us to the central theme of this whole narrative. It all boils down to this one crucial difference. The gap between a kid being managed by systems and a kid being actually understood as a human being. Okay, so look at this. It lays out two completely different worlds. On one side, you have managed, a liability, a problem, a file. It's so impersonal, right? It's just transactional. But then you look at understood, a person, a voice, a story. That's about seeing the humanity in someone. The author's whole life was basically a fight to get from that first column over to the second one. So to really get this, we got to go back to the beginning. Let's rewind to his early life in northern Minnesota and see how this atmosphere of survival really took hold from day one. So this was the backdrop. He's growing up in Section 8 housing. His single mom is battling chronic alcoholism. Survival just becomes the name of the game. Then you add an ADHD diagnosis when he's just 3, and he quickly gets labeled as the disruptive kid. In a world that felt like it had no rules, you know where he found stability? In the predictable stories of TV and pro wrestling. And this right here perfectly explains what he means by atmosphere. It wasn't just a messy home life. It was a reality where he had to become a strategist. He was constantly reading moods, trying to predict outbursts, getting ready for whatever was coming next. That's not a normal childhood skill. That's a full-on survival mechanism that just becomes part of who you are. Okay, so as he gets into his teens, things get even more complicated. That instability at home now has this whole complex network of official systems layered right on top of it. And look at this list. It wasn't just one thing. It was this whole maze of systems all tangled together, and each one had its own rules, its own paperwork, and its own group of adults talking about him, not as a person, but as a case file, as that problem that needed to be managed. Wow, this insight into foster care is just so powerful. It's not just about having a roof over your head. He's saying the system itself is sending you a message, and that message is you're temporary. Your life can be uprooted at any moment. You don't really belong here. Just try to imagine internalizing that as a kid. So, in the middle of all this chaos, where do you find, well, you? For the author, the answer came from an unexpected place, the juggalo subculture. And yeah, a lot of people might dismiss it, but for him, it was a lifeline. It gave him a community, a real sense of belonging, and a language for all the alienation he was feeling when his life was so fragmented. But then, in the midst of all this, something shifts. There's a turning point, a moment where he starts to discover his own agency and realizes, hey, wait a minute, I can actually have an impact on what happens to me. So he was failing in school, like really struggling. They put him on this strict behavior contract with super clear expectations, and suddenly, everything changes. He goes from failing classes to making the honor roll. The turnaround was just dramatic. So what happened? What was the secret fuel for this incredible change? It's probably not what you're thinking. One word, spite. Yep, his motivation was a pure, raw desire to prove every single person who had ever underestimated him wrong. After a whole lifetime of being labeled a problem, spite became this incredible fuel. It was his way of finally grabbing the pen and taking control of his own story. And you can see just how sharp that turnaround was right here. Before the contract, he's failing. The catalyst? A simple contract that just laid out the rules of the game clearly. The result? Honor roll. This taught him something huge about himself. He could absolutely succeed. He just needed clear instructions and a structure to work within. But here's the bitter irony. The same systems that managed his life so closely also completely failed him. Professionals decide it's not safe for him to go home, but then the system just lets him go. He's 18, there's no backup plan, and he becomes functionally homeless. It just shows you the devastating gaps in the safety net.
This is where he has another huge aha moment. He ends up at a workforce center, and he's learning all these practical skills, how to write a resume, how to do an interview, and it all just clicks. He realizes that success isn't some kind of magic you're born with. It's about having access to the instruction manual. It's a skill you can learn, and he was totally capable of learning it.
So after all that, what's the lasting impact? What are the lessons and traits that you carry with you after a childhood spent being, well, homegrown by systems?
Well, these are the survival skills he was left with. A constant vigilance, this uncanny ability to read a room, a person's tone, even their silence. He's guarded, you know? Because when your whole story gets turned into paperwork, privacy becomes a form of power. And maybe the biggest one of all, a deep-seated belief in what people do, not what they say.
And this quote just says it all, doesn't it? Talk is cheap. When you've lived through that much instability, you stop being impressed by a good speech. You watch for patterns. And if someone's words don't line up with their actions, pretty soon those words just become noise. And that leaves us with a really big question for all of us. His story is personal, but it's definitely not unique. So it makes you ask, right? What is our collective responsibility to the countless kids who, right now, are being processed like files instead of being heard as people?
In the end, the author leaves us with this direct, simple, and incredibly powerful message. It's really aimed at any kid who's still living inside these systems. It's a message of hope, and it's the real takeaway here. Every single person, especially a child, deserves the dignity of being understood.